couple of weeks of one of the biggest presidential elections in our lifetime. It is neck and neck, but things seem to be breaking in Donald Trump's favor. To go through this and more, I have Judge Joe Brown with me. Judge, thank you so much for joining me today.
My pleasure.
All right. You are a show favorite. Why do you think in the last 10 days things are suddenly breaking in Donald Trump's favor? Is it the amount of interviews he's doing, the rallies, his consistency, the fact that he actually has policies that he talks about? What are your thoughts on that?
All of the above, and also people are getting exposed to Kamala Harris, and the exposure is not doing her any good at all. She was essentially an unknown factor. Most of her career in California she had spent as an Indian. And then somehow or another she morphed into being black, and people weren't used to looking at her in that fashion, and people didn't know who she was, and she got in a primary. Didn't do anything. That was back in 2016, so nobody knew who she was. She got selected as a DEI hire by Biden, who specifically used the words diversity, equity, and inclusion, and he chose her. And then this time they kind of ambushed him, and nobody got a chance to say anything about whether or not she was to be the nominee. There were no primaries again, and she sort of got pushed on the public with the mainstream media acting as her and the Democratic Party propaganda engine, and that's something that America is not used to. So it's backfiring, I think. And from what I'm hearing, with the ear to the railroad track out on the ground, or the smoke signals or the tom-toms, it doesn't sound good for her.
Yeah. Let's go back to the question of who she is. When I try looking up pictures of her past, she's almost always in traditional Indian garb. She has been with other Indian celebrities, and they talked about being Indian. And then Donald Trump says, I didn't realize she was black. I thought she was Indian. And suddenly he's extraordinarily racist, according to MSNBC. And Janet Jackson said, I don't think that she's black. Suddenly Janet Jackson, a beloved American icon, is being badmouthed in the media. Like, what is really going on? I know you've probably researched this extensively.
I have. There's an interesting phenomenon that's kicked in, and I've noticed it when you go back and look through the past history of the country. Every now and then it happens where the press has so disgraced itself that people say, hell, if they're against it, I'm for it. So I think that's what's going on. Janet Jackson is kind of an icon, probably much better known than Kamala Harris. And I know I've said some very negative things about Kamala Harris, Emoff's candidacy. So we get demonized. I don't know why they are afraid to attack me directly. Maybe that's the wrong fight to pick, but they're going after Miss Jackson. They're going after other people. And this thing that Obama did a few days ago, when he came out and basically repeated a version of what Biden said, which is, you aren't black if you don't vote for me, or that didn't sit too well, particularly the attack that Obama started against black men. And a lot of black men hold Obama as being suspect anyway. Barry Soetoro, Bathhouse Barry, and that does not abide well with that demographic. And I think what's going on is, if you let certain people talk long enough, they'll start revealing who they are, and people don't like it. This thing about we have to do something about revising or repealing the First Amendment. My God, I mean, what's the matter with you? That's about as un-American as you can get. We have to set up a disinformation bureau. If anybody is a historian, that's straight out of the Nazi Party from 1990 years ago. We are going to take your guns, and no American should have more than 5 guns of any kind. And then the latest episode of her lying about she has a Glock, and we look at Mark 5 Glock, which isn't but 3 years old. So yeah, all right, fine. When did you get this Glock? And do you even know what you have? All right, then we get this thing where she says, I don't care whether you have these legally or not. We're going to come into your house, warrant or otherwise, and see what you're doing. Fourth Amendment, and this is supposed to be a career prosecutor in there saying this, that ought to be taken very seriously. And then the Fifth Amendment, Sixth Amendment, the due process clauses, 14th Amendment, and in the Bill of Rights, you know, that's going out the window. This sounds like something straight out of the book with Adolf and the boys from 90 years ago. And it's not something that bespeaks a healthy atmosphere for the country.
Yeah. You know, up until about 3 weeks ago, the strategy with Kamala seemed to be keep her in the basement like we did with Joe Biden. But her numbers were not doing well. The number one thing coming back was, I don't know who she is. And financially, I was better off under Trump. So now they start bringing her out on all of the major Democrat shows, nighttime talk shows, famous podcasts, and her numbers are going down. Do you think as people get to know her that they are realizing there's nothing of substance, there's no policy, there's no indication of how she's going to make their life better?
I think that's quite likely the case, sir. There is very little that she's accomplished. Let's see, there was a $42 billion program that's gone bust to bring the internet to rural America. That's gone nowhere. Elon Musk had something that he was setting up that was working, and they knocked that out of the box. Let's see, there is the episode where she was given or delegated the responsibility to be the American diplomat to Europe, and she got known as Miss Word Salad Annie with her yesterday is today and today will be tomorrow. So tomorrow is yesterday, which is why it's today. You know, like, what in the world? And that was embarrassing. And then she was the border czar, and now she's trying to claim credit for that, which is the wrong thing to do because people are looking out of their front windows and seeing what's going on, and they're getting the impression that they're being lied to because they're seeing what's on the ground. And the Democratic Party and her campaign with Waltz is claiming these things that are happening are not happening, and they're trying to flip the script and deal with accusing MAGA and Trump of doing these things by being racist. But then again, we have the Nazi model, and they were famous through Joseph Goebbels, the Nazi minister of propaganda, who said, basically in today's terms, flip the script and accuse your opponent of doing what you're doing. Yeah. So what can you say? Can you trust this woman? Can you trust this proposed administration? The answer on all counts is no. And the average guy out there in the streets is saying, hey, the more I find out about this woman, the less I like her. And then the more I find out about what they're trying to say, the more I get the impression that, hey, maybe Trump's not so bad, and maybe what they're saying about Trump isn't true at all, but simply propaganda.
Yeah. Speaking of propaganda, there was 2 big stories about Kamala Harris's husband, Doug Emhoff. Number 1, he knocked up the nanny. And number 2, he beat his ex-girlfriend at a movie festival. He hit her so hard, she spun around. There's multiple witnesses. The Daily Mail broke this story, and then it's gone absolutely nowhere. I mean, if Donald Trump had knocked up his nanny, Don Jr. and Eric's nanny, that would be all over the news. If he had beaten Melania or somebody, it would be all over the news. Why does Doug Emhoff get a complete pass from the mainstream media?
This is the first time that we have seen in American history the press become so partisan behind one candidate. And frankly, I was at a loss to explain this until it dawned on me. Hey, it's obvious. There is something going on here. And I just said, it's right in front of everybody's face. Can you put a crucifix in a courtroom or in City Hall or on a federal building? No. Can you put a crescent representing Islam in any of these places? No. Can you put a six-pointed Hebrew star in any of these places? No. Can you have a representation of six-armed Shiva, Hindu goddess? No. Can you put an image of Buddha in these places? No. But you can put rainbow. You can put it all over the White House, all in Congress. You go through D.C. and the streets are painted that way. The sidewalks are painted that way. The crosswalks are painted that way. You see it all over America. You see this incorporation of the rainbow into just about everything. And are we looking at the spread of a new philosophy, a new cult? And is this the kind of zeal that you get, the by any means necessary from anyone and everything that's involved with this? And I'm not getting on gay folk. They've got a right to get their freak on in their bedrooms and do what they want. And a lot of them are apparently against the idea of sexualizing children or just flat out obscene displays. And they don't like this transsexual thing, especially the lesbians. A couple I know tell me that they might think this is a cute girl over here that they're interested in and find out it's a boy. They don't like that. They don't like getting beat up or their nieces or grandchildren or children getting beat up in women's sports because some clown wants to put on a sports bra and a pair of panties. They don't like that. And they don't like this association with pedophilia either. But it's a coalition that's been in place for a long time, and it's gotten power. They have their acolytes, their disciples, and such like, and they're trying to spread it as the original, well, not the original, but the official cult of the United States, which has one interesting aspect of it that does not match any other that I can find, and that is they are against the development of the character aspects of typical cults and religions, philosophies that have been with just about everything else. Remember, they are against guilt and shame. So what are they doing? Anything goes. There's no morality, no ethics, no standards, no courage, no bravery, no honor, no obligation to defend and protect, no responsibility to make where you are a more safe place filled with economic prosperity, sense of purpose, cause, and to bestow peace, order, and public dignity upon your neighborhoods and your cities. We have seen this political party, blue, Democrat, and they have taken over the cities, and the cities have just become cesspools, islands of chaos. And we find that we now have them as safe havens, sanctuaries for illegal criminals who've crashed the border. That is a crime under American law, by the way. And in my humble opinion, I think everybody who set up a sanctuary city situation, assisted in this process, ought to be prosecuted for conspiracy to harbor a federal fugitive or fugitives, because by definition, someone who's crashed the border is in fact a federal fugitive. I know years ago when I was a defense lawyer, I tried enough cases where somebody was charged with harboring a federal fugitive, to know what it was about. And I think that a lot of people ought to be prosecuted or divested of their offices for engaging in this intentional breaking of American law. And it's not good for anyone. And they want to come up with a situation where they say, one, the population's going down, so we're going to build up the population. Well, frankly, I grew up in Los Angeles, California, kindergarten through law school. And when I left Los Angeles early 1970, I think we had about 1.5 million people in the county, and we had traffic jams from 4:30 to 6 o'clock. Now, last time I was back in LA a few months ago, it was 2:30 until almost 7:30. And you've got 14 some million people that live in the surrounding Orange County, LA County, Ventura County area that are all packed in there, and the crowds are horrible. The overcrowding is obvious, and you want to bring in a bigger population. And now you've got this UN thing that our ambassador to the UN is talking about. We want to bring in 600 million people to the United States from God knows where around the world. No way. And then you've got, what, 15,000 known murder convicts who have been let into this country. We don't know where they are. There are 25,000 people convicted of sexual offenses that have been led across the border. You've got 60 some thousand known drug dealers who have been convicted of drug offenses, and they've been let in this country. You've got this mess in the Middle East. You've got this mess in Ukraine. A lot of people hate us, and we came up with Homeland Security, Patriot Act, but now what good are those things when we let them cross the border unvetted? I've seen video clips of military-age Chinese males with interesting uniformed camping equipment that they're sharing, with huge backpacks that could easily carry in military-grade explosives. They could take down skyscrapers, communication centers, oil refineries, power nexus connections for the power grid, and nobody's checking. And then they get free transportation courtesy of the U.S. government. You've got 82% of the gantry cranes that are used in American harbor setups to unload container ships, and they've been finding that there are mysterious, what appear to be communications devices that are installed that cannot be readily removed from these cranes, these gantries. And are those things ready to set off these implanted explosives when the Chinese have indicated they're going to invade Taiwan, if necessary, in 2027? What are we doing here when we've given away our artillery inventory, rocket artillery inventory, and we don't have but 3.5 to 4 days supply of that which we are dependent upon in the event that happens in the South China Sea with Taiwan? And we've given away a lot of it since to Ukraine and Israel, and we are unarmed. We can make 125 a year. That leaves about opportunity to bring in 325 more, and we would need maybe 15,000 of them. And everything we have is essentially deployed, and that's about 3.5 to 4 days worth of ammunition, according to the Pentagon, if they really have to slug it out. And then the option is we just have to turn tail and run or go nuclear. And that's not really a great option for anybody to have. But it's brought about by this policy. Then you want to get back to why in the world do we have Kamala Harris going as chief diplomat for the United States and embarrassing us intensively with her word salad mess? And probably the answer is that at the time Biden couldn't go over there without creating an international incident because there are multiple pages worth of felony organized crime indictment against him and his son. And we have this little thing called the Article 6 to the U.S. Constitution that says ratified treaties are part of the supreme law of the land. What is the ratified treaty in question? 1999, President Bill Clinton negotiated a treaty with Ukraine that got ratified a few weeks later by the U.S. Senate and is part of that supreme law of the land. And it essentially says the U.S. and Ukraine agree to apprehend, detain, and extradite any party wanted by the criminal process of the other. So technically, we're supposed to take Biden into custody, send him over to Ukraine, which is not going to happen because he is the president, and what's in or remains in his head may be of vital importance to national security, but it's still right there. And why didn't they go 25th Amendment on him? Well, maybe what they're trying to do is to get, to bribe Ukraine into withdrawing the multi-count indictment, which the Ukraine Supreme Court revealed in late October 2020. So does that have anything to do with why we're over there, or are the United States' vital interests being protected? Now, Russia is saying something interesting that is not being touched on here. They say they're in the Ukraine, one, because they got asked to go there because a lot of Ukrainians want to be part of the Russian thing like they have been for the last 1,000 years. Two, they're trying to deal with suppressing this resurgent Nazism that is going on over there. And three, and this is very interesting, to spread of the rainbow cult is an anathema to most of the rest of the world outside of certain places in Western Europe and the United States. So they're trying to stop the spread of the rainbow. So those three things are what the rest of the world is hearing, and we don't even get a glimpse of it because of the press. What's going on here? What happened to free speech? You don't suppress misinformation, malinformation, disinformation. You oppose it by more accurate speech, better details, better data, better presentation when it's logical, reasonable, rational, analytical, and objective. That's how you do it, not by saying you can't say this or you can't say that, especially when you're not talking about pornography or anything like that. You're talking about ideas. Where did the United States stop furthering the free exchange of ideas and start saying you can't do this? This is what we saw in Germany, Deutschland, in the Weimar Republic at its sunset, 1933, 1934, that's 90 years ago. And we don't need to be in a position where some years from now, somebody asks us what we ask Germany. How did you let yourself get to this position of being enthralled to the Nazi party? We need to start asking ourselves now, how are we going to stop this thing where the U.S. becomes enthralled to the new Nazis, the neo-Nazis, the fascists, communists, if you want to put it that way, episode that is being ushered in by the Democratic Party? What in the world are they up to? Do they have any understanding of what America is about? And they keep using the phrase democracy. This is a republic. It's a democratic republic where the democratic aspects are exclusively concerned with the selection of the representatives that we are entitled to vote for. Outside of that, it is a republic with built-in protection. Now, I don't know what's going on. Maybe it's got to do with the ignorance that's being fostered in the schools today. But we have a problem.
Yeah. You brought up the manipulation of the media. Let me show you something here from the Atlantic. So they put out an article a few days ago. Kamala Harris might have to stop the steal, but before that, it was titled "To Save Democracy, Harris May Need to Steal an Election." Why are they beginning to float the idea that in order to save democracy, now she might have to steal the election? Are they trying to plant seeds of what they're about to do?
Yeah, they are. And then you will see in another week, they're probably going to try to claim that the MAGA folk are doing this. That's that Nazi-esque flip the script. Now, I think the last election got stolen. I personally, over the last 45 years, have been involved in several episodes where I witnessed or I was involved intimately with something that involved stealing elections, at least one time on an official basis as a state trial judge. Now, I note this. In 2008, the Justice Department put up the money in Memphis, Shelby County, Tennessee, to replace every single voting machine because they were deballed voting machines and they were deemed hopelessly corrupted. The county commission resisted replacing those machines in elections until, guess when? 2022. So the Justice Department has been issuing a quarterly report on this since 2006. And it keeps saying, once again, corrupted, hacked voting machines were used, which prevented a fair election from occurring in Shelby County, Tennessee. Now, in January 2021, they released a report saying that there were no substantive instances of election fraud relative to what had just happened in November 2020. But 2 days later, their quarterly report from the same Department of Justice said, once again, in Shelby County, Tennessee, the voting machines displayed characteristics associated with hacking, and there is no confidence that can be given to any claim that this last election conducted there was fair, impartial, and accurate. So which is it? This was about the 14th largest urban area in the country. So you're saying they had a hacked election and that had absolutely no impact on the outcome. But then you talk about 2 days before, everything was all right, nothing was wrong. And now, as you see, in legal proceedings all around the country, you have a situation where, wow, we're beginning to find that there was something to the accusations, and courts and election commissions are saying something went wrong.
Yeah.
So
let me show you one more thing, Judge. This is just right in line with what you've just brought up. In 2016 and 2017, Kamala Harris was saying that elections were vulnerable, especially through machines. Then when Joe Biden beats Donald Trump, she says, most fair and free election, our elections are secure, people can take confidence. Now she is floating the idea. Let me see if you can see that a little bit better. It says Kamala Harris raises doubts about whether the election will be free and fair, saying the only way it won't be stolen is if Americans stand up for that. So now she's coming out and sowing seeds of doubt that her election might actually be stolen. So this lady flip-flops more than Mitt Romney. What are your thoughts on her sowing these seeds of doubt?
Well, 55 years ago, I spent a year taking propaganda at UCLA in their political science department from somebody that actually, I'll be candid, was a visiting Russian professor emeritus from the University of Moscow. She was a good communist. She had been invited here on an exchange program, and she actually ran propaganda for the KGB for a short time, and before that for the NKVD. And at one point, her only superiors were Nikita Khrushchev, who was her basically superior at the siege of Stalingrad, where she got a Hero of the Soviet Union commendation, Joe Stalin, and Comrade Beria, who ran the secret police. So she was teaching these things on propaganda, and this is right in line with what she was observing, and that is, when you're getting ready to steal an election, you start laying the groundwork for it. She also said something else, too, that I've never forgotten. She said, we don't dislike the American system. And she said, in fact, the Soviet Union is going to become more democratic itself, but not until about 1990, when glasnost and perestroika will kick in. And she let me read this paper that was translated from Lenin, that was written in 1919 when he predicted this. But she said, America, unusually, we have long assessed as being the most endangered company when it comes to turning fascist. Said this time it won't be jackboot wearing, goose stepping uniformed thugs, but it will be, and this is a quote from her, pink panty wearing, long haired beatniks who will impose the worst aspects of fascism on your country to protect themselves and to protect you from yourself. They won't bat an eye, but they will be the source that you need to look to if you want to see where the threats to your country are going to come from. She said, when we cure certain evils, the Soviet Union will become Russia, and it will become capitalistic, just like you. Said, but we have a problem we were trying to correct, and that is we cannot do what we need to do to be a modern country until we have gotten around the fact that too many Russians were conditioned to being slaves under the czars. So Russia will change when there are no significant numbers of Russians with a living memory of their enslavement under the czars. That is our objective. She said that in 1967, which you saw, the wall came down, other things started happening, glasnost and perestroika. Ronald Reagan did what he did, but they also had a plan. And she said, we have to be aware of these pink panty wearing, long haired beatniks who will gladly impose fascism on this country. And that's exactly what we're getting right now.
Yeah. Wow. Very interesting. You have such a sharp memory to remember something from that long ago. Help my audience. Final question. I appreciate you coming on. I'm reading a lot about the appellate court in New York reviewing the $500 million Donald Trump trial, and they are not putting up with this the same way that the judge did. They're not seeing this through the same eyes. Do you see that case being overturned and that money being released back to Trump, or where do you see that court case going?
I see that case being kicked. There is so much that stinks to the high heavens with that. There's no victim. And then the problem is this: you take some of the most astute practitioners of the subject in America, the absolute experts, and you want to take Letitia James, and she becomes more of an expert on these things than these Wall Street oriented mega entities. Well, maybe I shouldn't say mega, but large scale interest have in the process, where they say, hey, both sides agreed that they would be responsible for their own research. We thought it was good. We got our money. We did not lose anything. The money came in when it was supposed to. We've done business with this entity before. We're satisfied. That's like me writing you a check, you taking it to my bank, cashing it, and then a DA says, I don't like Joe Brown. He wrote you a bad check. No, he didn't. I got my money. He wrote you a bad check. And then the most preposterous thing that I recall from the case was Letitia's office saying Mar-a-Lago is only worth $13 million when hell, the state of Florida had assessed it for tax purposes at $84 million. You can't even buy a lot around the place undeveloped for $13 million. So New York, through the DA's office there, is going to interpose their opinion, which they have not been qualified as expert witnesses to render. And they actually put in evidence, but through their claim that it's only worth $13 million and not 84. Well, hell, the charge to the jury is usually this: ladies and gentlemen of the jury, you've heard arguments and remarks from counsel. You should understand that such statements, remarks, and argument by counsel are not evidence. They are merely attempts to explain to you what the law is, what their interpretation of the facts may or may not be, and the application of the law to the facts that they urge upon you. Those statements are not evidence, but that was a primary part of the whole thing, that evidence that came from a statement or opinion of the prosecution. It was ridiculous, and they're going to smack them down. And I found it interesting. I watched that, and the representative from Letitia James's office said, Your Honors, my name is so-and-so, and one of them jumps right and, excuse me, before you get into that, you might want to answer the following question. And he laid it out, and she wanted to jump in. She said 3 words, and another justice, a female this time, said, and in addition, you might want to add in so on and so forth. And it was like, I've been there, always on the winning side, but handling appeals when the appellate court starts jumping the opposition and essentially tells you, we understand your argument. Is there anything you didn't include that you want to put in here? And then they start doing stuff like discussing a football game with you, or how is the weather? You know, it's like, oh, somebody's about to be slaughtered here. And that's the impression I got. I've only been doing this for about, well, a little more than a half century. And I didn't do too badly at UCLA Law School. So, yeah, I look at it in a certain kind of way, but nobody ever asked me. And they bring in people that have scant experience in the law, maybe 6, 7 years worth of practice before they got into TV or stuff like that. But, you know, I wasn't always a TV judge. I had a real world thing for a long time. They didn't even discover me until I was over 50. So
Wow.
I wasn't exactly sitting at home and, oh, could I get into one last point?
Yes. Yeah, please.
Did you see that 5-point plan to help out Black male Americans that this idiot Kamala Harris came up with? Number 5 was legalization of marijuana, et cetera, et cetera. So I guess Black men could get into selling marijuana. Now, okay, just like wine, probably it isn't the worst thing you could do, but you don't need to sit on your couch and do nothing and blank out. You need to focus and get all of your energy on something. I had an ex-wife who was and still is into that. One ex-wife. I had more than one, but anyway, she didn't make anything of her life and she got distracted. So why are we trying to distract Black men with a drug as one of your 5-point programs? Like, come on, that's patronizingly insulting. Like Black men are going to vote because somebody is going to legalize marijuana, and like the implication is the people that smoke dope most in America are Black males. What the devil? It's like, have you lost your mind? If I was even thinking about you before that, what the devil? And then up to $20,000 of a loan to be forgiven. What is that? You can't even hire anybody for $20,000 a year. That's below poverty wages. What are you going to do with 20 grand? Okay. Oh, and then the other one, we want to train Black males to be school teachers. Why would anybody want to be a school teacher? Right here in Shelby County, Memphis, they're hiring new school teachers for just $28,000 a year. All you require is 2-year associate degree. If you got a 4-year degree, you get hired at $32,000. How are you going to attract somebody in there who's going to be working hard with one of the hardest jobs you can have, and they're at the bottom of the impoverishment level? I mean, what kind of insanity is this? And then she got it after talking to Roland Martin. We call him in the Black community the Pillsbury Doughboy with chocolate chips. So, I mean, Roland Martin's supposed to be your source and expertise to come up with a program to help Black men. That is so insulting. Don't claim us. We don't want it. And then Obama jumping in on that was just another horrendous episode of his where it's like, hey, now we know you're George Bush's cousin. George Herbert Walker Bush's cousin, George Walker Bush's cousin, Dick Cheney's cousin, and Sarah Palin's. Or did you know that? There's a guy known as Samuel Hinckley, Hinkley. Some of his descendants include President George Herbert Walker Bush, President George Walker Bush, Vice President Dick Cheney, a guy named George Herbert Walker who founded Halliburton, whose nephew, by the way, was Barack Obama's maternal grandfather, who was first cousin to President George Herbert Walker Bush. And when McCain and Obama were running against each other, McCain's running mate, Sarah Palin, was also a cousin of Barack Obama. It's all in the family.
Wow.
So what are we supposed to be doing here? Are you Black or are you something else here? And by the way, at least he had a connection with the United States through his mother. But even though I claim fraud and liar, when Kamala tries to claim being Black, which she isn't, even if she did have some in her, what is her connection to the United States? Her mother, Professor Harris, and her father, well, her mother, Professor Harris, and her father, Professor Harris, had academic visas. They were only transitory. They weren't trying to become long-term residents. They were just passing through. So interestingly enough, people ought to get a copy of her yearbook. You can find it. It's been out there for a long time. And she talks about kindergarten through 12th grade in Canada. So where she got all of this, a connection with the San Francisco school system, I don't know. And she told another lie. She talked about, I was that child being bussed, Mr. Biden, when she was running against him. Remember that? Well, at that time, I just happened to be a school teacher in California. And California had never had officially segregated schools. They might have the equivalent based on residency and economic level, but they never had segregated schools. So she was lying about that whole thing. And as a matter of fact, you find her mother with her in Canada when all of this is supposed to be going on anyway. So she occasionally visited Dada, but that would be occasionally on a break or a holiday or a birthday. So that's not exactly going through it. So she lies. Look at the other one she told. She was in a dorm room smoking dope and listening to Tupac. Well, when she was in the dorms, Tupac was 11 years old. And if I'm not mistaken, his first release was a single when he was 21. And he got his first something on the charts when he was 23. And she was an assistant district attorney in Alameda, California, assigned to, guess what, prosecute marijuana use. So at one point, she was giving out the stiffest sentences in the United States of America to Black males in the San Francisco area for simple possession. And let's take another lie on that adult truancy thing. Remember that one? She started off when she was San Francisco's district attorney, and then she got elected to California Attorney General, and she got that thing passed into a law. She giggled and laughed, ha 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 ha, but no adults were locked up. And I personally interviewed a certain Mrs. Peoples or Miss Peoples who was in the medical field. She had all the I's dotted and T's crossed. Her daughter suffered from sickle cell disease, not anemia, from the disease, and would have episodes of screaming pain. And this girl's 8, 9 years old at the time. And she was trying to get help, and she would have to be hospitalized 60, 70 days out of the year. But Kamala, when she got to be Attorney General from the United States, used her as a scapegoat, locked her up, prosecuted her for several years. The daughter, who was 13 at the time, couldn't stand the strain. And since sickle cell disease makes people prone to strokes, the girl had a stroke at 13. And at 22, she still is paralyzed on the right side, thanks to Miss Kamala Harris. So she lied about no one went to jail. And she lied about what she was doing. My in-laws were from where, last set of in-laws, they're now deceased. And there was a liquor store, for example. A Black guy set this liquor store up. He put a lot of money into it. It's really a first-class operation, but it was targeted for a lot of holdups. Kamala's thing was, instead of catching the crook, she filed a civil action to shut the business down. The man went bankrupt, died of a heart attack from the stress because they closed down his business rather than catching crooks. You see, this is the kind of thing she did. Okay, we're back to this thing with how did she get to be Attorney General of California? One West Bank. which was essentially owned, he was a majority stockholder, George Soros, who had a CEO, Mnuchin, that we remember from the Obama administration. It caused a lot of Californians to lose their homes and go bankrupt through fraud. It wound up that Mnuchin and One West Bank were indicted to the tune of 5,200 plus counts of indictment in just about every county in California. Well, Soros, through a former secretary of Kamala Harris, wound up, along with Mnuchin, raising quite a few millions of dollars for her to get elected as Attorney General. And when she got elected as Attorney General, the first thing she did was consolidated all 5,200 plus counts and had them dismissed. So several weeks later, Soros sold One West Bank for $3.42 billion and made a tidy profit off of it. So yeah, real nice, Kamala. And then, by the way, why are you hiding the fact that you're married? Wonder about that one.
Yeah. Wow.
Is that part of the feminist agenda? But then you have Mrs. Sarah Palin. You have Mrs. Pelosi. You have, all of the Mrs. all down. Mrs. Clinton, what's the point here? Why do you try to disguise this? What's the problem? Or did you not want us to deal with what you were talking about earlier, the beating and the impregnation episodes?
Yeah. Well, the media has glossed over them, so I guess whatever they were doing worked there. But the more she talks, the more people realize there's not a lot there. So it'll be interesting to see what happens on November 5th or whenever they get around to counting the votes, right?
Yeah, and people are dying in the Ukraine. And our borders are right open. So tomorrow is yesterday, and it will be today because it was yesterday. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, gosh. Well,
and by the way, some of my physician friends tell me, you know what that shows? That is a reflection. That is a symptom of what they call early onset dementia, which can start in somebody's mid 50s. And it's considered early onset if it strikes before, say, 62, 63. So she's 60 years old. She's not that 40-some-year-old picture that they show. And by the way, in the industry, you can put a little chip in the whole process. So even if she looks like she's 60 and you're standing there looking at her, what somebody's going to see on when they look at it on their screens is somebody that looks 40, 45-ish. Now, one other little point too, that debate with Trump, I had been warning people for a long time that Biden and Harris were using these IFB devices. They look like little miniature hearing aids. They do not have these cords like you see the big white loop cord with the newscasters. You can't see them. And they're often in the forms of pearl earrings. And Biden would occasionally have the decryption box slip out under his lapel that he's got in his side, his coat. And you could see that. And I said, if you look closely, watch to see if the person looks like they have on two mic packs or something in addition to the mic pack, and you will see the decryptor. So nobody else in the studio can pick it up. And a couple of people called in on my X space that I do with the real Dana on Tuesdays. said, I bought some of those. And a couple of people posted on X and they showed what they had. One woman said, I'm a businesswoman and I use these so my people can feed me information while I'm talking to business associates and potential customers so I can look like I'm on top of things. So Harris had on a pair. And then there was another thing on X where they apparently malfunctioned on occasion. And she's sitting there talking back to them like, hey, you got to fix this, blah, 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 blah. So we just have a dishonest person, two dishonest people running. And then did you see the stuff on Waltz about why did he really leave teaching and the implications about why they call him Touchdown Tim? And he is lying about going serving in his rank, which he never had. And then he dodged when his unit got sent over for actual combat. And he lied about being head coach. He was only an assistant coach. So does anybody in this administration tell the truth in any kind of way?
No, it does not seem that way. Well, Judge, this has been a great conversation. I appreciate you coming on. If people want to follow you online, where can I send them?
You can get me at Judge Joe Brown TV on X, at Judge Joe Brown TV. There are other people that claim to be me, but they're not. I'm at Judge Joe Brown TV. And by the way, speaking of censorship, I had the maximum number of friends on Facebook. But interestingly enough, I've never posted anything on Facebook. But do you know they banned me for life because they say they don't like what I was posting on X.
But you're not even on Facebook.
Yeah.
Oh,
I mean, I had an account just so I could read stuff people would send me, but I've never posted anything. But they banned me for life for what I say on X.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh.
That's like what they did to Elon Musk in California. The Defense Department wants him to do 50 launches from Vandenberg Air Force Base, but California's offshore commission denied him the license, saying they didn't like his politics.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh gosh. Well, I'll make sure to put that direct link down below so that people can follow you on Twitter, not on Facebook. I appreciate you coming on, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.
One other thing.
Yes.
A commercial. Myself, Tiffany Haddish, and some other people, Beyonce's personal chef, we have a barbecue line. It's called Judge Joe Brown Barbecue. Judge Joe Brown Barbecue. You can get it on Amazon. And if you've got Amazon Prime, it's free delivery. You'll get it in 2 days. And we also have a website, Judge Joe Brown, JJB Barbecue, BBQ.com. Go there and you can get more products. We've got chicken links, beef links, beyond meat links, veggie links, and they're hot, mild, smoked, raw. We have seasoning powders, hot, mild, and the sauce, spicy and mild. I like the spicy myself. And we are doing way better than we thought. And if you try it, I think you'll like it. Most people say it's the best they've ever had outside of maybe something they might have fixed. So
okay.
JJBBBQ.com. Order yourself some, go on Amazon. You can get the sauce, but not the rest of the stuff.
Okay. I'll put direct links to that as well. Thank you so much. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, sir. Have a great one yourself.